Thank y'all for being with us. Thank you, Father Patrick. Thank you, Tom. I think it's really beautiful that we have such a rich liturgical calendar and season. And so it's a really meaningful thing that this is the first Sunday of Lent for us to kind of order ourselves and stop and consider this Lenten season. You know, I haven't always been very familiar with the liturgical seasons, but it really is a beautiful, rich, deep, ancient practice of the church for us to order our days, our weeks, our months. And so I think Lee and I are new to fully ordering ourselves liturgically, or trying to incorporate that into our home and our family and really be mindful of what season we're in as the church helps us prepare the way for the next celebration, prepare ourselves in this beautiful rhythm, you know, of celebration, of austerity, of ordinary time, and the colors that go along with that. You know, our youngest son is 6, and he's in the kindergarten and preschool group, and they go to the atrium, and they have kind of a Montessori-based experiential touch and feel concept that they're teaching the little kids. And anyway, he did this beautiful little piece of art about the colors that are used throughout the liturgical year. He could talk about them and name them. And so it reaches the very young, it reaches the old, you know, and we learn and grow through these beautiful, thoughtful seasons of the church. So here we are in Lent. So I think this falls beautifully into our study of the 10 Commandments as well. We are trying to understand these guidelines, these expressions of love, these kind of guidelines of discipline into our life. So I wanted to start with asking you, you know, what are you setting out for this Lenten season? What are you taking on? What are you letting go of? What are your Lenten goals? Does anybody want to share something with us? Yes.
Okay. We would like to share that we do have fish on Friday. We're senior citizens, so we really don't have to
Right.
do the Lent thing, but
Right.
we figure we're responsible people.
Yeah.
And we're gonna follow the rules.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes. So in addition to the liturgical seasons, we have these recommendations and obligations from the church to not eat meat on Friday. And graciously, even if you're outside of that 18 to 65, I think it is, to take it on, you know, to live that out, to make that small step. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else feel moved or inspired by their Lenten penance, their Lenten challenge? Anything they want to share? Deacon.
It's easy.
Yes.
When you're taking coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
We started over at the monastery over times, and I thought, okay, here we go. I want you to know that God has a sense of humor. I never wanted coffee so badly during that Lent that I did at that time. But that one of the things that the other thing that I was growing up in the 60s and all that, and Vatican II said, well, let's, instead of giving something up, let's do something extra.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a comment. I don't think it's an either or. I think you need to do both. And the reason for that is it takes much more discipline to give something up, because that is always nagging at you that you want to do. And this Lent, Facebook, you know, every time I can't tell you how many times a day, just go in and go to Facebook, make my comments, you know, they were right.
Absolutely.
Okay. But no, there's something.
Yes.
To discipline oneself, you have to take something away. You have to take something away. runner will do extra laps or work extra hard to become that. If you just say, well, I'm going to do whatever, it doesn't add extra. I'm going to pick up a wheelchair. Wonderful. But that doesn't affect you as much as giving something that you really want. And offering that sacrifice to God during this season.
Thank you, Deacon Raymond. Yes, I think that's a great point to recognize the sacrificial austerity, the penance element of letting go of something, but letting go of something that you'll really feel and notice, not just something that is sort of half-hearted that won't make you pause. Would you like to share?
Just to elaborate on this one, which is mine.
Yes.
It's just about exercise, my food choices, amount, sleep, going to bed every decent hour. I am not watching any TV when I get into bed. And that's my thing. I use that to kind of
Unwind or relax. Yeah.
relax a little bit. But so this one covers a lot of areas, and there's a lot of sacrifice in a lot of things that you're doing.
Yes, and I think you both hit on something, I think, that touches all of our lives, the screens, the social media, the television, whatever are kind of our comforts in that, are kind of mindless time. But when we stop and really think about it, it's a lot of time. It might be several hours a day or more. There's some commercial for some, internet service right now that says the average family is using the internet or on some type of screen more than 7 hours a day. And I know we're in a pandemic, and I know a lot of us are working from home and learning from home, but still, that is a huge number, and that's just a statistic. So yes, I mean, what can we really take on? What can we remove? What can we prune from our lives this Lenten season that will help us to move in the right direction of the persons that God would have us to become? Anybody else? These are great. Anthony, yeah.
We let go of things and we continue to embrace God. I think it can also be a season where we convert others who are not Catholic, who are not practicing that there's a strong sense of bringing towards God. And I think that also helps because we give up things, we make sacrifices, it also helps us spiritually.
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. Thank you. You touch on something. That's it. No, Anthony, you touch on something that I'm going to mention several times today, of this ripple effect. A lot of people, a lot of the message in our culture right now is that you do you, I respect you for your choices, whatever your truth is, go with that. But the problem is we do live in community, we do interact with one another, and our actions and our lives are like a stone dropped into the pond. There is a ripple effect. And so if we are not tending to our souls, if we are not seeking peace and unity with God, there is a ripple effect of that. And the flip side is if we are, and if we have found a peaceful place, if we have found a place where we can truly love others well after we first love God well, there's a positive ripple effect there as well. And so these concentric circles moving outward are our society, and as we've talked about before, the family is the center of the society. And interestingly, not too long ago, I was listening to a Fulton Sheen talk, who I just love him. There's an app actually that has a lot of his recorded homilies. And anyway, he was talking about this topic, in like 1958. Okay, but he said, not only is the family the center of society. How women are treated and how motherhood is treated is indicative of the family and of society as a whole. I thought that was really interesting and beautiful as well, so many years ago that he said that and spoke that. So yes, Anthony, thank you. I was reading also this little book that a friend gave me about searching for inner peace, and it made the argument of, some people may think spending too much time on yourself and finding peace is maybe not the best use of your time. Maybe you should do something more active. But the point was, if you don't have that inner peace, how can you give that to anyone else? How can you share that love of Christ and the peace of Christ with anybody else if you have not cultivated that? And so this is a beautiful opportunity in Lent for us to cultivate what we need to cultivate. And I hope that all of us can take pause and take stock of where we are and what we need to cultivate specifically this Lent. Maybe it is pruning back on some of our habits, our comfortable habits that are kind of only a receiving experience from us. The screen time, the social media, maybe the extra desserts or the extra that we're kind of padding ourselves with for extra comfort and care. What can we prune away that would be valuable? What is lurking in the shadows and in the dark places that we need to address this Lent? And just to close on that Lenten topic before we move back into the commandments, there's a beautiful reflection here in this week's bulletin, and I just wanted to share a few lines of it because it just hit me. So if you have yours right in front of you, let's see, this is kind of in the middle of that second page, and it says this is under Live the Liturgy, inspiration for the week. And so it offers that we have this history of Lenten practices. And then a few lines in, it says, we are asked to unplug from our attachments, compulsions, obsessions, addictions, routines, and busyness, to clear the slate and take stock in who we have become. We are asked to remember the ancient sign of God's covenant with humanity in which he vowed to nurture, sustain, and protect the relationship that he has with his people. Once we slow down a bit and clear away some of the clutter, we can see how the journey of our life is unfolding. We can see what brings us in and out of tune with God's love and how we can better imitate God's loving fidelity in our relationship with him. Even though some good self-denial is the order of the day, greater happiness and wholeness will be the fruit of our labor. So I thought that was so beautiful. I'm going to reread that. Thank you for sharing what some of you are taking on. I hope it's a really fruitful Lent for all of you, this time of austerity, this time of taking stock. What are the 3 elements of Lent that our church instructs us on? What are those 3 things? Fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. So those are, again, helpful guidelines, this beautiful wisdom that we get from our church in this liturgical season to consider the fasting, the almsgiving, and prayer. What is almsgiving? Great question. What is almsgiving? Anybody like to answer that? Giving of yourself, time, talent, treasure.
Treasures. So what do you give to Catholic charities or to the church?
Okay.
Well, we've increased our contribution, increased our, Catholic charity, this and that. So is that correct in doing that? In other words, what I'm saying, I guess, it's time that we evaluate our contribution, and we found that we're not contributing or contributing as we should.
Okay.
part of our, is that an all day, every day, or like this week, we've been here church 3 times this week. Come on, see me.
Well, I think one beautiful thing is that there's not really a prescription for how to fulfill that call to almsgiving. I think it looks differently for every family. But obviously something has moved in you to say, hey, we could do more. So what does that more look like? It might be going through your closet and recognizing, hey, I have 10 jackets that no one is wearing in my house, and I'm hoarding them. I'm keeping these. In a sense, as we close on the 7th commandment, I'm robbing the poor of what I have in my house that I'm not sharing with others. It might be that. That speaks to me because as my children grow and change, we have a lot of things at the house that no one is using. And I think to myself, I have 5 pairs of kids' shoes. I need to take these to Goodwill so someone else can use them. Maybe it is.
That's right.
That's right. Thank you. But right. So what does that look like for you? Maybe it is volunteering. Maybe it is giving of your time if there is limited treasure. But I don't think there's a Deacon, help me out if there's a prescription. But I believe the way you live that out is particular to your circumstances, and we are called to reflect on what that means to us personally. Would anybody else like to share on that?
Right, it's one of the things that we do during Lent is being prayer. And if you're wondering how you can increase your almsgiving, whatever, is that prayer and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That the Holy Spirit will put something in your heart that you'll start searching. It's going to be different for everyone. And it could be a particular time in your life where maybe I need to get my prayer life better. That could be that almsgiving. Or it could be, cleaning out your closet or that sort of thing. Or anything where the Holy Spirit will prompt you, you might be able to be involved with, like a more pro-life. I'm on the board of Life on Wheels. We're always looking for advisors, sidewalk counselors, or who can help in that way. There's so many ways that people are hurting and they're wanting the face of Christ to present themselves to them. And then whenever you're looking at these people who are in desperate need, you will see the face of Christ suffering. And it's coming to the realization of the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that opens your heart to that. And it can be many, many things.
So as we're thinking about what can we do? What can we actively, how can we better respond during Lent? And that does lead us into finishing up on the 7th commandment of not stealing, not taking, and this concept of, are we receiving more in our lives today, or are we giving more in our lives today? Are you a constant recipient, or are you pouring yourself out in some way to those around you? That's our beautiful definition of love from Jesus, right? This beautiful, full and complete outpouring of love from him. So I think that's a great question for us to kind of assess ourselves and have an examination of conscience, if you will, of how much am I receiving and how much am I giving? How much am I pouring myself out? And lately we've kind of come to ask our children that, because sometimes I take stock and I think, I'm eager to make everything really go smoothly and go beautifully for my children, but am I asking enough of them? Am I putting enough responsibility upon them? Or are they just receiving from their parents and at home right now? Am I just receiving? Where am I called to do good work? Where am I called to pour myself out a little bit more? Especially in the ways that I don't want to. Especially in the ways that make me uncomfortable. Do you remember last time Lee and I spoke, we talked about, who's that one person in your life or in your family right now that that you'd really rather not have anything to do with, that's the person that you're called to love? What's that one way of service and of giving of your time, talent, treasure, of giving of yourself that you withhold right now? What are we robbing others of that we could give? Is it pausing to really listen to that friend who you know is hurting and really needs a listening ear? And really giving your time that day when you really don't have time or interest, but you perceive that that person needs a listening ear? Is it holding your tongue and not speaking to those under your roof in a way that is not bringing them life, but really bringing them down?
It's a natural reaction to not want to be disappointed or to be rejected. And I think that works well. Well, that's always a problem. You know, I kind of overcome that the more I study. And I think, let's put it this way, I found out that if you're trying to convert someone to Catholicism, it isn't like they did in the Church of Christ, which would go to the person and they would tell them everything that was wrong with the church they were going to. But in the Catholic Church, you don't pull, you don't push, you stand next to them. And I kind of tell my relatives, look, you don't want to come off like a preacher. But I said, look, I've got to do this. I have to do this as a Catholic. I've got to. And I'm not telling you to be a Catholic. I'm just asking you to open your mind and just listen to what I have to say. And you don't go and tell them, that church you're going to, everything they're doing is unbiblical, etc. And so that's what I like to do. But still, you go, well, I told them this last week. Now, do I talk about it again because they don't seem to be getting anything? But I will like to say this. I decided to go to Mass every day, but I can't get here, so I watch it on EWTN. Now, here's the thing. People in their house pick things up by osmosis.
Right.
I watched The Journey Home on Monday night, Father's 50th University. All right, now I started watching the Mass every day, sometime during the day. I tape it, so I watch the daily Mass. And then here's the problem. That's a higher Mass than what we do. They got into, they do a lot of Latin, and I don't know what in the world I get out, I don't know what I'm saying. So I got to do all this. Well, the people in the house, they ask me about this. They go, well, he just said something in Latin. What did he say? The only one that I can figure out is the word of God. That's an easy one. But anyway, so it took me to go, I do a lot of history study, but what are we at, I know what we're doing here, but I don't know what you're doing on EWTN. It takes them 20 minutes to say the Agnus Dei. I mean, it doesn't stop. Here we do it in 10 seconds, So I've got to explain this to people because they're in the house and they're watching this. And they go, why are they doing that? I found out that frankincense, when they do the smoke, clouds of smoke, it actually has an additional benefit. And I tell them that because they go, I don't want to smell all that, mess up my sinus. But anyway, it's an ongoing thing, but still, I go, well, I told them all this, and now do I call my daughter on the phone to see if she likes it? Oh, Daddy, you're just preaching again and all this, and so, but I always remind myself, as a Catholic, I'm supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it. I mean, that's not
No. Well, and isn't it, you bring up a great point, Bill, and I appreciate you sharing how, you are in that first mission that we are all called to, and that's to love those that we live with and who are under our roof. And sometimes that's the hardest mission of all, isn't it? Have you ever noticed how easy it is to be nice to a stranger, or to do something for a stranger, or kind of a peripheral relationship? Like, you're signing up for that. That's easy, right? I have no baggage. I have no emotional issues with that because I don't know that person. So I'm going to go serve that person. Now, obviously, it's wonderful to go serve a neighbor in need, a stranger. I mean, I'm not trying to discount service in our community, but I think it's very interesting, and what Bill is mentioning here is that I think it's important to recognize that that's easier. That is less complicated. It requires less of us than to tackle our familial relationship or, someone very close to us that we are at odds with and that we'd rather avoid. I think we all have someone in our family who is we would identify as a challenging relationship. Mom and Dad, I'm not talking about y'all. I'm saying this to myself too. I see my mom and dad looking at one another. We all have these people. We all have these people in our lives. that it takes a lot to serve and love and make that phone call. But I would also challenge us all to realize that there's this beautiful quote from Mother Teresa who said, if you come in judgment, there's no room for love. If you come in judgment, there is no room for love. So when we do go to these difficult relationships, are we first coming in love, or are we first coming with a judgment? Which requires so much discipline and self-control, right? I mean, I feel this all the time, as we're trying to get ready and go to school and church and all that. My older daughter once said to me not long ago, I'm trying to do all the things, Mommy. I'm trying to do all the things that you're asking of me, And I could tell she felt, Mama is judging my outfit, judging how I'm doing it, judging. And so I have to say to myself, am I first trying to love my child, or am I just covering her with, do this, do that? You're not doing that well, do it again, do this, So I feel very convicted in that as well. So are we pouring ourselves out, or are we receiving? Are we doing the good work that we are called to do? And again, in our church's wisdom, I think it's so beautiful how, our church speaks on topics that not every denomination and faith speak to. Not only do they help us with our individual lives, with us and God, with us and our immediate relationships, but as we're finishing this topic today, we move into the community, the state, the nation, the globe, and our church gives us guidelines on how to love others and love other nations, and our duty and our justice to that. So if you're following along, I believe today we're on 2437 in the Catechism through that end of that chapter. So we're talking about justice and solidarity among nations, love for the poor, works of mercy. One thing that's really beautiful, again, what I was just speaking to, 2441, what I think embodies this whole place in the Catechism, and really the whole purpose of our Catechism. It says that our church is interested in the full development of human society. The full development of human society. They're not wanting us to just be our base nature and just kind of go on and worry about ourselves, but we are to worry, and maybe worry is not the right verb. We are to be aware and to serve all of those around us. First mission in our home, then our community, then our state, our nation, and then internationally on a global level. And I think it's really beautiful that we have instructions here on economic justice, on social guidelines here. It's really beautiful that we have it outlined here that we are to love the poor, Man, that's hard to do at times, right? I'm scared of the poor. I'll be honest. That is my gut reaction. When I see someone who I feel like is homeless or in need, I feel uncomfortable. I'm afraid at times. But here I'm called to love the poor.
Beggars on the street, they're handing out. How do you know they're homeless?
Well, we don't. But is it our place to know? We don't know. But it is our place to respond in some way, in some appropriate way. I mean, obviously, our health and safety and well-being and, the kids in the car or whatever, we have to be mindful of all of that. But are we doing the good work that we should be doing? Are we donating? Are we giving our time and money and effort? Are we loving the poor in the way that we are able to? I think that's really beautiful. St. Francis, not St. Francis, Pope Francis, in some writing, wrote about this 2446 from St. John Chrysostom. I don't know if I ever say that right, Chrysostom. But to say that, it says here, quoting that saint, not to enable the poor to share in our goods is to steal from them and deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs. And in this thing that I read about Pope Francis, it was basically saying, like, when you throw food away, you are stealing it from the poor. You are stealing it from someone who might be able to have it. And that hit me and challenged me to do something with our leftovers or to do something with food that we're not fully consuming. And that was a great challenge to me because I do feel like we throw away quite a bit of food and how I can address that and freeze it and take it to a service that would give that food out, like Meals on Wheels or something. So again, what is the good work that we could do, that we should do, that we're not doing? It's really interesting if we look at these 10 commandments straight on. You might think, okay, I'm not killing anybody. I'm not, hurting my mom and dad. I'm not stealing and robbing stuff from a store. Okay, got it. Cha-ching, I'm doing all right. But it's so much deeper than that, right? It's figurative. It's spiritual. It is a call to really delve deeper. Am I bringing those around me to greater life? Or am I bringing those around me to a darker place? Am I even aware of that? Am I bringing them up or am I bringing them down? Am I robbing them of something that I should be doing? Where can I grow to do the good work, the dignity of work, the participation in creation that God has made us for? In thinking about good work, and I'm going to pass the torch to my good man, a good husband, right here in just a second. But in thinking about work and responding and doing something actively to live out the life that God has for us, I was thinking about idleness and what happens when we're idle, and how work is essential to our life. That's how we were made to be. We were made to move and do something. And interestingly, there's so much in the Bible about a warning against idleness, a warning about not doing the work that is before you. Proverbs 10, if you read that whole thing through, it is just a repetitive call, not only in Proverbs 10, all of Proverbs, to not let the devil come and get your idle hands, to put your body to good use, to not shirk what is before you. It's very repetitive. Has anybody recently done a study on reading all of Proverbs? A couple of years ago, some ladies and I did that, and I was just totally shocked at the repetitiveness of Proverbs. It's like, this was so important, the Lord needed to tell us 500 times. Seek wisdom, avoid foolish ways. Don't be idle, avoid idle hands. There is this call. There is a call, and it's a repetitive one, so maybe our thick brains will accept the call. But this dignity of work, yes.
Ironically, Archbishop Sheen he noted in his book, Life of Living, a study which was done at the University of Colorado, I believe it was, about dogs.
Dogs?
And, dogs.
Dogs, okay, I'm sorry.
The study was this, to see why dogs, what would make dogs bark, or what would make dogs be more complacent, behave better. And so they had a dog that was flea infested on one side, and then they had one completely free of fleas on the other side. And then what they found in the study was that the dog that had fleas was much more content. He was always scratching, of course, and trying to get that flea from biting. But the one that had no fleas, it was idle and just bark and howl and just was generally unsettled for most of the time. And there was other things they did with that research. Of course, Archbishop Sheen concluded in the spiritual sense is that the idleness is where the human nature concocts or comes up with things that really don't do us any spiritually good. But that if we stay busy, not necessarily busy for the sake of being busy, but busy because it's actually has dignity with it.
Yeah.
Yes, it accomplishes a lot more from the spiritual level. And I thought that was a good point that you brought out in that study.
Yes.
That's in his book, Life Worth Living.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
So, what I've learned, when we deliver food every 2 weeks to the people that are in need on the west side of town, some of them are the happiest, most grateful people. They go, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. They have nothing, but they say that they're blessed, and that actually gives blessings to me. There's one street I don't like going down because it's a dead-end cul-de-sac. I turn the car around and then, I'm talking to Anthony or Chuck or Dan, and I'm going, if there's an issue, we need to get in the truck and we need to go. I'm going to be, and it's an easy way to get locked in. I mean, there's cars, beat-up cars that people work on and they can block you in, and it's very uncomfortable, but I guess the point I'm making is, we need all different kinds of people. Some of them are grateful, and some of them expect you. If they don't get a certain type of food, they're voicing their concern. But we really are blessed to be able to give them what they need. Some of what they need, not all. And then we realize how fortunate we are to have what we have. It makes it a lot more grateful for what you have.
Yes.
Just to make a point, my wife used to work for Salvation Army. They have a rule when people call up about, there's a man with food share, he used to be out in front of Walmart, etc. They got a rule, they said, don't ever do it. Because they're professionals, and you can always tell something. I've broken the rule before. My wife said that's not what you're supposed to do. I'm just getting to that. It's a sorry state of affairs we live in this country where you have to be afraid. When I was a young man, people used to come up and knock on our door and ask for something to eat. And my mother would fix them a sandwich, and they would sit on the floor and eat. Nowadays, you don't answer the door for the mailman. You don't listen. People are scared to death. And get back to the Salvation Army. If you want to make a donation to the Salvation Army, they'll tell you where to go. They say, do not get out of your car in the parking lot. I mean, that's terrible, but that's the way things are, And my wife said, when you come down, she would order me to come down there and do some things. She'd tell me, she said, you bring a pistol. She said, don't, I'm packing heat when I go to the Salvation Army. But I mean, that's how bad things are. The people in the parking lot aren't in the Salvation Army. They're anyway, that's
Well,
maybe a little off.
there's lots to consider, and there's lots to consider as to how we serve. I would like to ask Lee to come up and share his thoughts as we continue to think about the dignity of work, the meaning of work, the necessity of work. Thank you.
Catie always asks me to kind of chime in, and so I'm always sort of trying to think about what, I guess it's the orderly scientist, and I'm always kind of go back to the topic, and the topic of this commandment that seems so simple on its face, and I think that's by design, but thou shalt not steal, right? That's our interpretation of it. I love the Ten Commandments. I love the Old Testament because I think that it is an example of the brilliance of God in that on their face, they are simple enough that you can tell our six-year-old and he understands it. But at the same time, there's a whole lot more there. We, I think, gloss past it because we were that 6-year-old and then we kind of move on to other parts of our faith and we don't come back to the Ten Commandments. And I always feel a little bit uncomfortable as I'm reading the Bible because I always feel like I'm not getting the actual interpretation of the language it was written in. As someone who speaks a language of orthopedics, the way I interpret certain things is very different than the way you guys do. And I just realized how, this was written in another language. So I love this, like Hebrew for Christians. Okay. So this is from this website that says stealing in the sense of the Hebrew word ganab refers to both the act of carrying off by stealth that which is not one's own, but also the deceptive inner disposition that accompanies the action. So, it's not shoplifting. It's actually the entire disposition of self, which would lead you to such an act. So again, some of these languages, ancient languages, are much more expressive in their ability for one word to mean much more than what we, our English is. So it's very careful and go deeper into these things and realize there's much more here. And so this site says, at the bottom, stealing is an act based on fear, since the attitude behind the action evidences a lack of trust that God will meet our needs. That's a pretty deep concept. But in general, I think that understanding stealing is, I would encourage you to take a step back and think of it in terms of a much more existential view. And so just kind of some things I was looking through is that, we are psychologically built to find meaning and responsibility. And the commandments are, I think, the way it's been interpreted to me is that it's actually God codifying things that are already built into our DNA. He's just telling us this is actually from me, right? These are things we know. Your child knows, right? A toddler who you've never had a conversation about stealing with understands this is mine because I obtained it and you took it from me. That's something we understand. You don't have to explain it. That's already in our, so why is that? Well, God helps us understand this, I think. Genesis 2:15 says, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it, right? So, it's a Garden of Eden that we interpret as having all the things that man needs. He could have said, like, enjoy, right? Just sit here, eat peaches, and just, it's good. It's exactly, this was built for you perfectly. But Genesis 2, work it and keep it. What does that mean, right? That means a lot of things. And I think that's on purpose that it's vague. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people because you have a garden to keep and you know what that looks like. Katie's garden looks different than mine. But it's interesting that he didn't say, just chill out here in the garden. Everything's going to be cool. This is before the fall, right? So I think that's an important thing to take away. That's the very beginning, right? And then as we come further down in the Bible, right, come to 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12, which says, and aspire to live quietly and to mind your own affairs and to work with your hands as we instructed you so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent upon no one. So that's where work, again, separate completely from the fiducial nature of it, of money, is that other people will see what you're doing and understand that you will have a stronger witness about Christ to people because you're not dependent upon them, and that they see that you're doing something that we all as humans understand to be upright, So now think of it in that way, right? It's not about money. It's about the fact that other people are seeing the way you're living your life, and they listen to you when you tell them about Christ. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And then, for me, just, again, I love Jordan Peterson because I think he brings his well-readness in terms of ancient religions with modern psychological science and joins those two together. Again, Jordan Peterson says that the purpose of life is finding the largest burden that you can bear and bearing it. It's an interesting concept too, right? He's become extremely popular in today's world among young men. He has one of the biggest followings ever on his social media. And it's because he says things like this. And so it appeals to us. But I think we need to understand that this commandment is really about something very deep and existential, which is it's about this cycle of sacrifice, of making he calls it, I love the way he describes it, is basically bargaining with the future by delaying your own gratification, right? You're making a bargain, you're going to delay gratification for something to obtain something later. And that cycle is something very important to our humanity. And when we defy that cycle, bad things happen. And that is what God's telling us in this commandment, I think. That we all know deep down, yes, my brother took that from me, that's stealing, that's basic. But it's much more than that. Like we are designed to work for that which is coming our way. And it's not always fair, and it doesn't always work out the way you think it will, right? It's not really that you thought that work was worth $100,000 and you only got 50. It's more about the concept of, obviously we're here for a reason, and one of our purposes is to work, And what does that mean? Well, there's a purpose behind each little step along the way. So in the way that we comport ourselves on the earth, it gives us a better position to display Christ to others, maybe that's what it is. But I think it's just also that it falls into the ultimate, one of the big concepts, right, of Christianity, which is that of sacrifice, right? You're giving up something now to get something later, or you're, burning something so that you are, you're bargaining with the present to get something in the future, right? That's as existential or mythological a way as you can look at sacrifice. But I think that is on a tiny scale what work is, and so we have to live it so that when we are asked to make a bigger sacrifice, we have the skill set available to us too. And I think that's a really important thing that we are losing pretty handily right now, because we have not done a good job of maintaining that. I think we haven't had to, but I think that technology has really forced the issue to some degree of forgetting that cycle prepares us for much bigger battles that await our children and our young people later on. Because if you haven't sacrificed in school, and which no longer is a given, or you haven't sacrificed in your own family, which is no longer a given, right? You won't understand what the sacrifice of being a parent is, or being a CEO is, or being a physician, right? These are things that we build over the course of our lives. Again, the commandments help us understand how to live orderly lives. So what you were talking about, and the sadness we see around us, is the exponent of disorder, right? Again, the Augustine quote of every disordered soul is its own punishment, right? And I think we're living, we're seeing people living it. You go and deliver food to someone, and their response is, I don't like the way this tastes. You know what I mean? That's an unbelievable place of disorder in that person's life, And so God's just trying to help us here through these tiny little battles of understanding why we end up in the places we do. But I don't know, that's sort of my summary way I approach that. I think that each commandment amazingly has that degree of depth, as does the book of Genesis and Exodus as well. So I've really enjoyed that part as I'm an adult, trying to go back through some of these things that you've taken for granted about the Old Testament and sort of trying to see it in a different light. You do have to get a little inventive and go outside the corpus. The catechism is amazing and extremely well researched. You have to follow some of the veins down, these smaller avenues. Some of them draw even on other sources, especially, the Hebrew and the other languages will sometimes lead you into a strange sort of path of thing. Like, I always thought this word meant this to me, but it actually, to those people, meant a much bigger thing or a much different thing, and so just, I think, helps me to remember as we read these things that we're grasping a very small part of what is an unbelievably historical and rich tradition that we're just, which is why I think that it's hard to hear someone kind of declare that this is what the Bible's telling you, right? It's like, as Catholics, we understand that, we're a tiny part of a really big thing, and that helps me feel a little better about it, honestly, because I don't feel capable of, declare exactly what this means,
Can you
What
tell
else?
them about the book that you found that you're reading Jewish origin.
Oh, yeah.
Eucharist and the whole issue, the whole concept of sacrifice.
Yeah, not really relevant to exactly to this commandment, but, and I heard about it from Bishop Barron, but Brent Petrie, basically the Jewish roots of the Eucharist is pretty, I think, pretty crucial to all Catholics to read, in the sense that, you know, what you interpret to be about the Eucharist is, you know, day to day is a tiny part of how deep it goes in understanding the depths of what it meant to the people at the time when Jesus said what he did in John 6 and in several places, and how those people took it, again, to kind of get back to the same concept, like, how could you possibly understand what it was like to be a Jew living in, you know, a Roman-controlled country at that time? I mean, in another language, right? And just understanding what those things are, it gets even better the more you understand it, right? The concept of the Eucharist, it is unbelievable. It would be timely because it really heavily focuses on, you know, the Passover and the season, I think. So it's not big, and I heard about it completely from Bishop Barron's podcast, but he's written several other books. He's a scholar of Notre Dame, but it's worth. I think it would be a good Lenten book, especially in the year of the Eucharist, and sort of their focus on that. It's the Jewish roots of
Jesus and the Jewish roots of the
Jesus and
Eucharist.
the Jewish roots of the Eucharist. Brant Petrie,
He
PhD.
also has a YouTube video that just summarizes that for you in about
Yeah.
an hour.
That might be a good one because it is pretty dense into some history, Judaic history, but it's well worth the understanding of just I'll leave you the one tantalizing part is the concept that, you know, in the Passover lamb, the Paschal lamb, this whole concept is really, obviously you hear it over and over again, but he really makes a really firm point of understanding that, you know, in the Passover you slay these thousands and thousands of lambs that they went to the temple, and only the temple priest could slay the lamb and spread the blood on the wooden post of your home. But also you had to take that lamb home and eat it and consume the lamb. The sacrifice of the Passover is not complete until the lamb is eaten. We don't talk about that. No one really seems to just focus on that. We talk about the blood of the lamb, and we pass over the fact that they went home and they cooked it with bitter herbs and you ate it, and that was the only way you could complete the Passover celebration. And obviously, a Jew living in that time would understand what Jesus was saying much better because he understood the Passover sacrifice. You know, and all the prefiguration of Jesus as the Lamb. It all makes much more sense, and it's just, you know, it makes the Eucharist much more special, I think, when you dig deeply into realizing what Jesus was saying in some of these parts of the Last Supper.
Can I ask you to share one more thing about kind of the element of sacrifice in your own life and in your entry into high school, and kind of the sacrificial nature of the beginning of medical school, and kind of that being using that time of loss that was fruitful in the end?
Yeah. I think that as I say sometimes, I was fortunate to have to face some suffering and sacrifice at a very influential time in my life when I was in, you know, a teen, almost a preteen, which was by far and away the most valuable experience of my life, just because it helped orient me to some concept that I think is extremely important concept, which is you have to take advantage of the opportunity of suffering to realize the value you get out of it. And, you know, sacrifice, the cycle of sacrifice leading to meaning is, and we talked about last time we talked, this is my favorite topic, I guess. But I think it is one of the major concerns for young people right now is the loss of that concept, which I think we all learned, many of you here learned just because you grew up in America at the time you did. You know, your parents were sort of people who lived through World War II or whatever. You know, it was different. And I think we can't not quite understand yet. We will reap the benefits of this sort of disassociation of the cycle of to, number one, live a meaningful life, and to number two, achieve what you really want to do. You have to do things that are uncomfortable, you know, or disagreeable. And, you know, we somehow, I think, are creating many, many young people who don't understand that cycle is built into our DNA, as we were saying. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things that's going on right now, especially in America, because number one, we don't have existential crises very, very much. We don't have to look for food. We don't have to look for shelter and safety very much. And number two is technology has deceived us to think that everything that we need, we can get very quickly without almost any effort. And that is just a really dangerous thing, in my opinion, not because of what it is, but because of what it's going to do to us in our brains and our psyches. And, this commandment, to bring it all back, I think it's one of those ways we need to kind of realize that we are going to have to voluntarily impose this way of thinking upon the new generations in America, because they are not getting it naturally as you did, your parents, grew up coming off of the Great Depression and then faced the real chance that Japanese people would show up with guns on the West Coast and roll up into the Midwest and kill everyone. That was a real thing, and that we are so far from that. We came so far from that so quickly that I think and then injected technology, which we're just now understanding what it does to us. I mean, it obviously can take about 10 years to figure that out. Kids who were born with the capabilities of social media and the internet. I think we're going to learn about that. But I think it's time for us now as a church to sort of get behind small ways. And beautifully, our church is built on that, right? I mean, that's Lent, right? It's what a great idea, what a not so recent idea, And so I think we can fall back upon the things we have, these concepts, these symbols, which help us deeply to understand, even children, But I think we have to hold to them and teach them and dig into it, because you're not gonna get some of those old world values, whatever you call them, from basic life. And Tom, you live it in school, I'm sure. I mean, high schools are interesting places to be. Colleges, there's some concerning things. I think. That's all I got. I'm out.
That was wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for organizing us and for allowing us to be together this morning. Thank you for your participation. We talked on some really important things that I hope we can carry with us. And if you would mind, let's bow our heads and close in prayer together. Thank you, Father. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your commandments. Thank you for our beautiful church and our liturgical seasons that instruct us and guide us and inspire us. Help us to love your ways. Help us to have a deep affinity and an abiding desire to know your ways, to know what you have for us. Help us to look deep within ourselves this Lenten season and really examine ourselves and see how much we are receiving and how much we are pouring out. Please illuminate within our minds what we need to change this Lenten season, what we need to pour ourselves into. We ask that your will be done in our lives, in our homes, with our family, that your will be done in all difficult burdens and situations that we may have in our hearts today. We ask that you would intervene and allow those to cooperate with you so that your will may be done in their lives. We ask a special blessing upon our parish and our priests who serve and love us here at Holy Spirit. We ask that you help mold us into the people that you would have us to become. We ask all this in your holy name. Amen.